Starta snart. Okay guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how to make an explosion using FumeFX in 3ds Max 2020. And we're gonna start off by building like the main explosion, which will then be able to create a shockwave too, using a different FumeFX grid. So we're gonna do the explosion in two parts. Let's just create the FumeFX grid like this. And okay, so I've already done some simulations and I found a couple of values that were good to use in order to just to optimize the tutorial process and not making it so lengthy. So I'm just gonna put the values in for the width, length, and height. So as you can see, it's gonna be a pretty big explosion. So it's kind of semi-large scale, I would say. I mean, it's not that big. It's not like an atomic explosion. It's something in between. I don't know. Is there something called a normal explosion and an atomic explosion? It's semi-large scale, so to speak. And then we're going to create a separate FumeFX grid to simulate the shockwave. But yeah, one step at a time. So let's just open the FumeFX UI, and we're gonna, I don't know if I should, yeah, you know what, we're gonna come back to this spacing later. Let's just have it to a decent value so I can show you the preview, and we can go into the simulation tab, lower the amount of iterations. Usually when you do, you want to touch the iterations depending on how fast or slow your simulation is going to be. Like if it's a really fast moving object and the fire needs to move along with it, the FumeFX simulator or solver, so to speak, needs more iterations in order for it to make up for the fast moving object between each frame. And this goes hand in hand with the maximum and minimum simulation steps. But anyways, just put it to 30. This is enough for like explosion type effects. And for the vorticity strength, we're going to put up the scale just a tad bit. Actually, yeah, just a tad bit. And then when it comes to this time scale, the time scale is going to basically, it's important to understand that time scale is not just how fast the simulation will be. The time scale affects all the parameters, whatever parameters you have set, or whatever values you've set for a specific parameter is going to be multiplied by the time scale, right? So, and the simulation is going to go faster. So, I mean, it's going to look like the explosion explodes faster, so to speak. And for this particular explosion, we're going to actually animate or keyframe this value from 3, and then we're going to move a couple of frames to about 15. Oh, actually, I don't know. Yeah, to about 15. And then we're going to come back to, and then we're going to come back down to 1. And then we're going to go to the turbulence tab. For this particular sim, I found that a value of 5 was good, but we're going to animate this too, so we have a really turbulent explosion or blast from the beginning that then like kind of mellows down or settles down as the smoke rises. So it gives a sense of a more large scale explosion. So we're going to keyframe this from 0 to 10, and we're going to increase it to 5, and then go forward a couple of frames, and we're going to simulate, put this value down to 0, like that. And the scale we can set to 30, the detail levels to 5, of course. We want as many like details in the smoke as possible when we get the turbulence. This gives a sense of more detail, and you can use a lower value or higher value of the spacing, so you don't need to like crunch as much RAM as you would have needed without increasing this details level. And for the small details, we're just going to leave it at that, and the small detail amount is 0.58. Oh, okay, 0.5. We're just going to leave it at that. And then the burn rate we're going to set to 10. By the way, I assume that you already are familiar with FumeFX and thoroughly know what each parameter does. I did go through the parameters a little bit more in depth in my Fireball tutorial, but as always, if you do have any questions, please leave a comment or send me an email, and I'll make sure to answer you as soon as possible. And for the variation, we're going to just set it to 0.8. The heat production, leave this be, but the expansion, we want the flames, or the initial like fuel, I guess, the fuel, we want it to expand really fast and then mellow down as it rises, like a real explosion. So we're just going to animate this. We're going to set it to 3, and then animate up to 15, and we're going to put it down to 1, I guess. Actually, yeah, no, we can keep it at this, I think. Yeah, we can keep it, we can keep it at that. And then add another keyframe at 18 and go back to 1. So we make sure that the expansion is at around 3 at all times in the beginning, and then subtly drops down to 1 as the fire rises. Okay, we can perform a small preview. Okay, thank you. Let's see how this... Oh, guys. Now see, this is why it is very important to be attentive. I have forgotten to create a source from which the fuel is going to originate from. And we're going to, of course, use a particle system, because particles are extremely versatile. And we can create many different, like, sources or shapes of sources upon which the flames may rise from. So I'm just going to create a standard preset flow, and we're going to emit from 10 to 30, and we're going to emit 600 particles. Make sure that you rotate the icon so that it points upwards. You can also use the reverse, click the reverse here, but I don't know, too much OCD. I wanted to like have a proper alignment. So, oh wait, what is happening? 180. Okay, just like that. Perfect. Yeah, and then we're gonna make sure that we have a delete operator, because we want to delete our particles after a set amount of time, so we don't endlessly explode things. So lifespan to 4, a variation of that onto 2, and we're going to have a divergence of about 30, I guess. That would be good. And then the speed at 470, variation of a, I don't know, 150, I guess. Yeah, just like that. Actually, that seems to be yeah. That looks good. So, what more? Nothing. We can close this, and we're gonna create a particle source. We're gonna add our particles, And when you create a particle source, make sure that when you create the particle source and you are going to select which particles, make sure that you select the event from which the particles arises from. So for our example, it would be at if we look at the pipeline here, it's at event 001. So our particle flow source generates particles from this event. So make sure to select that, just like that. And then if you increase the radius of the FumeFX balls, I guess, you can see them right here. But so we don't want these balls, let's just call them spheres, okay? We don't want these spheres to be in a constant or have this shape at all times. As they die off, they should decrease in diameter, because that will give the explosion a much more natural look. It's just gonna look too bulky if you have them at this like constant size and geometry. So we're going to change it by changing the radius. Oh, first and foremost, set it to a size of preference. They should be quite big, because we want the flames to kind of expand and explode from the beginning, or blast, and then wane off as they rise, as the flames rise. So if you open this particular particle radius graph, you can actually change the, oh wait, it actually looked good. No, it should be like this, sorry. And this is just a matter of preference. I want them to become like quite small. Wait, can we, Bezier, yeah, choose, right click and choose Bezier tool, or Bezier. Then you can get these like anchors upon which you can edit the size in much more detail. I would say something like this is cool. Yeah, that should be good. So let's see what happens when we have a preview. And as you can see, this is really cool, but I think the explosion happens too long, right? Or am I wrong? Maybe it happens a little bit too long. No, I mean, it's okay. It's okay, it's okay. We're good. Like that. This looks really good, actually, like for a first try. I mean, it's not a first try, because I've done this simulation like 5 times, but anyways, let's try a bit more higher in resolution, in the resolution department, and let's see what happens. So as you can see, it kind of expands really nicely in the beginning, and then when the fire rises upwards, it kind of wanes off. You'll see it soon. You can already see that the fire kind of mellows down at the edges as time passes. Yeah, this looks really, really awesome. Now there's one thing that we have not done, and that is to tell FumeFX that this particular plane, the YX plane, should act as the ground, because this gives it another like layer of realism. You're gonna see the smoke and fire kind of stick to the floor as it rises upwards. Yeah, okay, so this is what we have. And just like that. Look at that beauty. Woo! It's sexy. It's really sexy, you know. Okay, weird. Anyways, yeah, we're gonna tell FumeFX. So go back to the general tab, and no, not the boundless, not the boundless. Go to the simulation tab, and then tell FumeFX that the blocking size should be the Z minus, so the XY plane, Z minus, and then perform the simulation again, and you're gonna... Okay guys, so I just paused so you wouldn't have to watch the simulation. This is the end product, or not the end product, this is actually the preview of the simulation, and as you can see, it looks really good. If anything, I would actually change the time upon which the particles are generated to a lower one. This looks more like a fire blast, or fire coming out of a vent or something, instead of an explosion, I would say. I don't know, I think it looks cool. It reminds me of an explosion, so I would deem this an explosion. But if you think that perhaps having a variation in which the particles are deleted or something like that, I would definitely try to experiment with that. But I think we're done here. The only thing left is changing this horrendous color of the fire. And what I would do is, of course, go to the render tab, and no, we want the fire. Go to the render tab and then right click and press key mode, so you get this gradient ramp kind of thingy, and choose a black color at the end like that. Black here too, and you want to have a darker red-ish color over here that transitions to a brighter yellow. Not so much green, like that, I would say, and then a darker red like this, perhaps. Yeah, something like that, definitely like that. And then lower this. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, we could try lowering this to 0.20, and then take the opacity down to 0.7. So this just makes the detail in the fire kind of counterintuitively, I would say. I mean, we're decreasing these two parameters, but I don't know. I think it makes the fire pop out a bit more, and when you add a glow effect in like After Effects or something like that, it doesn't like overexpose the fire so that you just get like crunched white look to it. You still see like the color and the details in the fire is preserved. This is actually a little bit too red for my taste. What happens if we okay, we're gonna change this to a lighter yellow, so less blue, less green, more red. Nope. What about over here? No, we do not want. We don't want it like that. What happens if it's yellow? Oh shit. Yeah, maybe something like that. I like this. Yeah, something like that. I don't know, it looks weird for my taste. I mean, this is a tutorial. You really have to finely tune this color parameter in order to get a satisfying look. I won't bother like experimenting with this a lot right now. I'm gonna say this is okay for the time being. Yeah, and then perhaps increase the sharpness. This just gives the fire a bit more I would say edges to the fire gets more detailed when you render it. Ooh, this bothers me a lot. It's not how I want it to look like. Shit. And then for the smoke, we will just increase the, or actually we go to keyless mode and then darken it up a little bit, just like that. What happened with the smoke though? Oh, right, okay, so when you do this, make sure that you do it at a much higher resolution than this, else you're going to miss out some detail in the smoke, as you can see right here. And then increase the sharpen strength to 1. Yeah, that is about it for the main explosion, I would say. You know what? Let's do another simulation and click the Fire Create Smoke tab. And let's just do another simulation, okay? I'll be back as soon as it is done. Okay, welcome back, guys. As you can see, this looks really phenomenal. I would say it's a pretty damn good simulation for a tutorial. This will be our main fire, or main explosion. What we're going to create next is the shockwave as the fire explodes. So we get like a shockwave which has its epicenter at the middle of the fire, and we want the shockwave to travel in like a I would say a ring out towards the viewer, just like a nuclear blast of some sort, right? Or a, like, I don't know if you know what a mortar start, patala. And then the only thing left is the shockwave, which has its origins from the epicenter of the fire blast. So yeah, let's just get on with it. Okay guys, I'm really sorry. So just in the middle of recording, I realized that my microphone was actually not picking up any sound, and I managed to do a good bit into the shockwave grid or FumeFX like setup. So what I'm going to do now is actually just guide you through the parameters and what I've done up until well, I realized that the mic was down or shut down. So let's just show you the FumeFX grid. Is it not showing? Why hide grid? Okay, so what I did was create a grid that was 800 to 800 wide and long, and the height of it should be not this, it should be 92, just like that. And what we're going to do next is check the general tab, and here I just I'm going to increase the resolution a tad bit so we have something nice to look at, and then I will go into the simulation tab, and what we have here is that I animated the X turbulence from 0 to 15 frames, from 0 to a value of 3. Now this will give us a very sudden motion or chaotic motion from the beginning that sort of mellows down after frame 15. And the scale of the turbulence is set at 10, and I increased the detail level to 5, but it kept these other values as is. And I of course disabled the fuel simulation because we do not want to have any fire in our shockwave. But one or two important parameters are the dissipation RV, is the dissipation minimum density of the smoke and the dissipation strength. Now, the dissipation minimum density is the minimum allowed density of the smoke before it starts to dissipate, whereas the dissipation strength is the rate at which the dissipation occurs at. And what we want is that from the beginning we want to have a really dense and thick smoke, but at a certain frame we want the smoke to dissipate rather fast. And what I did then was to animate the dissipation, I'm going to call them the dissipation parameters, from 0 to just a frame before I want that sudden increase in dissipation strength, to a higher value, a slightly higher value, and then from the frame that I want the dissipation to happen at, I really crammed up these values. So this is going to give us a very nice and fast shockwave that fits our explosion. And what we're going to do next is check the radius of the FumeFX spheres. Now, as you can see, these are rather thick, and to be honest, or actually they're not that thick, because we have the, oh right, you know what, we're gonna set these to boundless, which means that essentially the FumeFX simulation is not going to take heed to the limits of the FumeFX grid, and it's going to simulate even though the particles or the FumeFX like source goes through the boundary. Now this is going to increase simulation time, but I think that would give us the best results. And then we're going to go back to the radius of the spheres, and we're going to actually, I want it to look something like, at first they're quite, wait, let me just experiment with this a little bit. Yeah, so from the beginning they are quite big, and then they kind of wane off as time passes. I think that should give us a really nice look, but maybe that should happen a bit later. Something like this. Let's see. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, let's see how this looks. Okay, so here we have the preview, and it looks really nice, but one thing that I missed was to make sure that the smoke actually glides on a virtual plane, or like a fake plane, because we don't have a plane right now, but this will make it look much more realistic, because the smoke is going to kind of like glide upon the invisible floor. So what we're gonna do is just tick off the blocking sides Z-, which basically means that the opposite direction of where the Z-axis is pointing towards will act as an invisible plane. So in this case, here we have the Z plane, and the opposite direction, the grid that is on the opposite direction, will act as the invisible floor, which will be the plane on the YX plane. So okay, I'm just going to redo the simulation, and I'll see you soon. Okay, so here we are again, and I don't know if you can see a difference, but you see where the particles start and how there's a trail that follows the ground as they expand outwards. That's what I was talking about by the smoke sticking to the floor, and as the particles moves, it's going to get dragged out, creating a really nice effect. So we're basically done with the simulation. Now, of course, when it comes to you have to increase the resolution for the final look. And remember what I said before, that you want to be as close to your final resolution when you play with the settings, because increasing the resolution tends to affect the simulation as a whole. It's going to look different, okay? But we're going to remain here, and the first thing we're going to do is add the lights that we have created for the scene. like that, and this should give it a much more realistic look. Yeah, do you see that? That is amazing. And we want to match it with the smoke of the fire, of the explosion, main explosion, which was kind of dark. And then we're going to increase or sharpen the smoke itself. I don't think you can see that much of a difference in the preview, but it does when you render it out. Yeah, the next step is basically rendering it out, and I assume that you know how to do this because I will not show you, but if you do have any problems, make sure that you write in the comments or contact me at my email, and I'll make sure that that I include the rendering step in future tutorials when it comes to FumeFX particularly. So what I'm going to do now is show you how the final composition will look like in After Effects. So see you there. Okay guys, welcome back. So here we are in After Effects 2020, and what I have done is basically we have I rendered out a basic environment for the explosion, and then we have the main explosion and the shockwave files over here. So what I did was first drag the shockwave, then the explosion, and then the environment files or sequence into the composite or timeline. So what I did first was to import the sequences, the separate sequences. We have the main explosion, the main explosion, the shockwave, and the environment upon which the So what I did next was to import the sequences, the separate sequences, first the shockwave, then the main explosion, then the environment upon which, or in which the explosion takes place in. And let's just take them off and look at them individually. So here we have the shockwave that I rendered out. And here you can definitely see what I'm talking about when I mean the smoke sticking to the ground, you see? Now, if I would redo the simulation, I would make it first and foremost much bigger, and to make sure that the particles actually have a higher velocity, because I think it's a little bit too slow. And then if we look at the main explosion, here we have it. I'm going to do it like that. Let's just take a look. You see, looks really cool. Now, if you notice, right about here, see that line, that like artifact? That is actually the grid, the FumeFX grid, which means that the basically the grid was not wide enough for my simulation. And what I have to do for the next time is to make sure that I either simulate in a boundless is it XY? Yeah, a boundless XY grid, or I make sure to have a wider and a broader grid. But I mean, overall it looks nice. I think I could play more with the color of the fire, especially when it rises. I don't know, it looks a little bit too yellow for my taste. And another thing to think about is the fact that if you use V-Ray as a render engine, you can actually incorporate really nice global illumination. And what you can do is render out the separate render elements, like the diffused light, the reflections, the refractions, the global illumination, etc. And really do a complicated composition to get the most out of your render and be able to change the colors of whatever element that you deem fit to apply a change upon. But I mean, I would say for a tutorial, I hope you kind of get the gist of how it is to create an explosion in FumeFX using particles instead of either an object source or a simple source, because with particles you can get really creative, and it is an extremely versatile tool. Yeah, I would say this is the end of the tutorial. So make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Comment definitely if you have any questions, or like, I don't know, some form of critique. Write whatever you want. Contact me by email, and I'll make sure to answer as soon as possible. Yeah, have a great day, and see you in the next tutorial.